So today we're going to be installing an Artillian splitter valve on the front end loader of the Kubota BX. As you can see, I've got everything laid out in front of me, what we're going to need today. So let's just dive right into this. Alright guys, so here is the Artillian Diverter Valve Kit in all its glory. As you can see, it's a really nice setup here. They've got a couple of band clamps on here, or worm clamps, to be able to mount it to your loader cross member. As you see here on the bottom, they've got a nice little rubber mount there so it doesn't scratch your loader, and it also keeps this thing from vibrating or coming loose and sliding upside down. It's got an aluminum block on it. Looks like it's billet aluminum, very strong stuff. And we've got your 4 couplers here because this is a dual port manifold where your typical third function valve or diverter valve comes with a single port. As you can see here on mine, this is a Summit third function valve. It's going to look the same way whether you have an RW long or a Land Pride third function valve. They all mount the same way on a Kubota BX with this bracket and the couplers facing forward. Now I also have the Artillian Diverter Valve Kit here. I just have this hanging over my grill guard so I can show you guys the installation to this as well. But as you can see, there's already some differences with the way their kit mounts. Their kit actually mounts the cross member sideways so that the lines come sideways and the couplers also face off to the right as well. So it's just a little bit of a difference, just a minor difference, but it is going to change the way we install this. So that's why I want to show the installation of both of these today so that you guys can see each way in case you have an Artillian Diverter Valve Kit or some other diverter valve kit versus a third function kit. Getting back over here to the Artillian Splitter Valve Kit, here are the instructions. So as you'll see in these instructions, they have a separate page of instructions for how to install the splitter valve kit to an Artillian Diverter Valve Kit. It's a very quick, easy process, which I'm going to show you guys. It ain't going to take me more than a few minutes. And then at the end here, they have an installation guide of how to install it to a non-Artillian Diverter Valve Kit or a generic third function kit. As you can see here, the instructions aren't quite as long. It's basically the same process, but I found out with a Kubota BX, there is going to be some extra steps involved, especially with the way this loader is designed and with the way that the hydraulic lines come through this gap right here between your loader boom and your front grill guard here. So as you can see here, you've only got so much room to run these hoses through here, so you don't have a whole lot of placement as far as that splitter valve goes, where like on the John Deere 1025R, 1023E, they usually mount them splitter valves right like dead center somewhere on the cross member. They could really mount it anywhere because the cross member on those tractors are much lower. They're more down towards the coupler here. So because of that, they're able to have a lot more versatility with where they mount that valve, where with the Kubota BX, we have to keep that splitter valve all the way to the left side here. Otherwise, we could be rubbing the hoses against our grill guard, or we're gonna keep them too close to the hardware on the side of the loader here. So we wanna make sure we're running these hoses right down the center here, and because of that, we gotta make sure we keep the block in a certain spot. And with that also comes the movement of the couplers that are on the block themselves. With the block here, as you can see, the couplers are mounted both to the left and the right. So when this block it gets mounted to where it needs to get mounted, you'll see that it's going to be very tough to plug in the left side ports because it's going to be basically right up against the loader arm. So because of this, I'm going to show you guys how we can get around that by pivoting these elbows here so we can more forward face these couplers. That way that won't be an issue. And where exactly we're going to fit this block so that we can get those hydraulic lines attached correctly so that they run right down the middle there. But it's going to involve you guys buying a few extra fittings to make this all work. So that is one thing to keep note. If you have a John Deere tractor or some other subcompact with the cross member maybe down lower and not all of the linkages and stuff like this in a way like the Kubota BX has, or if you just have more room with your hydraulic lines, this shouldn't really be an issue. Nonetheless, if you do have a third function valve kit, you will have to still use some adapters to be able to adapt this block to those lines because Artillian uses a 1/4-inch JIC fitting. So both on the block here and on their diverter valve kits, these are all 1/4-inch fittings on the ends of their hoses, where on your typical third function kit, they use 3/8 JIC fittings on the end of their hoses. So you have to adapt it from 1/4-inch to 3/8 JIC. So I'll show you guys exactly how to do that and what fittings I'm going to use to do that with. So all that being said, let's go ahead and get started on this. I just wanted to kind of get that information out of the way before we started so you guys kind of know where we're at. Alright guys, I've got you set up towards the Artillian Diverter Valve Kit, the couplers on the end. You're going to want to pretend that these are mounted to the cross member of a loader, so just have that in mind. The first thing you're going to want to do is get a 13mm socket, get an impact gun, and you're going to want to zip this bolt loose right here. Once you've got that bolt loose, you can go ahead and pull it out, and then you'll be able to remove the worm clamp. You'll be able to remove this collar up on top and this plastic clamp right here. This is one half of the clamp, and both these two pieces right here basically just get pinched together, and that's what holds these lines together to make this single port setup here. So once you've got all that apart, you can go ahead and remove the hydraulic lines from the block here. And then once you've got them separated from the block, you're gonna wanna grab a 9/16 wrench to hold the fitting on the hydraulic hose end. Then you're gonna wanna grab a 7/8 wrench and use that to spin the coupler off. And once the coupler is off, you're gonna be able to strap your new splitter valve to the cross member of the tractor, and you'll be able to take these 1/4-inch hydraulic lines and thread them directly into the block on these two bottom fittings right here. Tighten the collar up and you'll have a nice tight seal, and you should be all set. So that's all it takes to install the Artillian Splitter Valve Kit to the Artillian Diverter Valve Kit. Alright guys, so now we're going to move on to installing the Artillian Splitter Valve Kit to a generic third function. So the first thing we're going to do here is crack loose both these lines and remove them. You shouldn't lose a whole lot of fluid. You're only going to lose whatever fluid is in the lines here, since the third function valve is not being activated and the tractor is not running. Go ahead and crack these loose. Okay, so we got both those lines off. Now all we need to do is remove the old bracketry here for the single port setup. But before we do that, I'm gonna go ahead and remove these pass-through fittings, or bulkhead fittings they call them. That's what allows these fittings to pass through this bracket here. So to do that, we're gonna need a 3/4-inch wrench and a 13/16. I'm gonna use a 13/16 on my fitting here. And you're gonna crack this jam nut loose in the back. Go ahead and spin this jam nut off. And we can pull out our pass-through fitting. And that's what that looks like there. And you've got a jam nut here that holds it to the bracket. So let's go ahead and get the other one off, and then we'll work on removing this bracket. Okay, so now with the hydraulic fittings out of the way, we can now gain access to this U-bolt here. These are just 9/16 nuts. We can slide the bracket out of the way, and then you're usually going to have a couple of jam nuts underneath the bracket. You'll have to spin them off before you're able to get the U-bolt out from underneath the cross member. Alright guys, so now we've got the old single port couplers out of the way. I've got it all cleaned up. This is what it looks like. It's actually in really good shape still. Really surprised it didn't leave any marks on my loader. I was expecting that metal plate to scratch the crap out of my loader, but it never did. Never seemed to move, so that's good. Because as you can see on the bottom here, it did not have a rubber plate, and surprisingly it didn't even chip the paint on the bottom of the bracket. So that was good news for anybody who's got the Summit third function kit or any type of similar bracketry to their third function. But now that we got that off, we can start working on the new Artillian dual port manifold here. First thing I'm going to do is remove the hydraulic fittings, because I use Summit fittings, which over here you can see I use these Summit fittings. They're really good fittings. I don't know what kind of steel they use, but it's a really good steel because I've never had one of these fittings rust, and as you can see, they've got quite a good shine to them, where I've had regular Kubota fittings and other fittings that weren't quite as shiny. I've had them rust on me. So I've pretty much switched over all of my fittings to the Summit fittings, and the nice thing about these Summit fittings is they are the OEM factory Kubota style. So the flare here and everything at the end with this pin and needle, they're the exact same as the factory Kubota fittings. So I can plug this into any of my ports on my loader valve, which are all original. All of them work, so I try to keep all of my fittings the same. Just makes it easier when you got to go back and forth with different pieces of equipment. You know, if I don't have something that's made by Artillian and I want to plug it in, I know that all my fittings are going to be the same. Same with my rear remote kit on the back. All of them are going to be the exact same fitting. So that's one thing I'm really keen about doing. So I'm going to be taking off the Artillian ones, even though there's nothing wrong with them and they are good fittings. That's what I'm going to be doing. I've got two females here and I've got two males. I also like to change it up and have a male and a female for each port or each cylinder. That way I can't get them mixed up, because what happens is if you mix them up, your valves will change. So your up might be down and your down button might be up. And that's just kind of annoying when that happens. You could always throw like colored zip ties on it or colored tape so you don't mix them up. But I just find it easier to have one male, one female, and that way with all your implements, they all stay the same and you're never gonna have to worry about mixing up your buttons for your third function. So that's why I do that. So that's what we're gonna be doing. And then while I do that, I'm also gonna be cracking loose these elbows and we're gonna be rotating them out kind of like at a 45-degree angle from the block. That way we have a little bit more room or space to put these in, especially for these ones on the left end here that are gonna be closest to that loader arm like I was showing you guys earlier. So we're gonna get going on that right now, and once we get that done, we can get to mounting the block up, and I will talk about these other fittings I have here and why I have them. All right, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and crack these fittings loose. This is something, like I said, you guys really won't be doing. Most people do use the Artillian fittings. I'm just pretty particular about that kind of thing. Like I said, I like to keep all my stuff the same. If it wasn't for that, I'd have no problem using these fittings at all. Okay, so now we've got all the fittings off. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my thread paste and I'll get these new Summit fittings that I bought threaded on here. All right, so since we've got essentially two sides here, I'm gonna do a male and a female, one on each side. I'm gonna keep the male in the back and a female up front. The male is longer, so I'd like to keep that in the back. This is the back because our hydraulic fittings that our third function will go to is coming off to the left, so this is gonna be sitting on the loader just like this. Okay, now I've got them all thread pasted, go ahead and stick my fittings on here. And we should be all set to clock these elbows exactly where we want them. Okay, so we've got them tight enough for now. I'm gonna go ahead and crank them down the rest of the way once this unit is actually bolted or mounted up to the loader frame. That way it can hold it for me, and I'll give these a nice little reefing, make sure they're nice and tight. So now that we've got that done, we can go ahead and take an 11/16 wrench and we can crack these bottom jam nuts loose for these elbows. Crack each one of these loose. And then once you've got them loose, they will pivot. So you can kind of orientate them the way you need to. So my thought was to kind of have them at a 45-degree angle facing something like this here. And that way they won't be blocked by the loader frame and they'll be easily accessible. So I think I'm gonna leave mine just like that. Go ahead and tighten them back up. And again, I'll finish tightening those up once we get this thing mounted to the loader. So we should be in good shape now. We can go ahead and throw this thing on the loader frame. But first, let me explain to you guys really quick what I had to buy for extra fittings, because anyone who's hooking this up to a generic type of third function, they are gonna need these fittings to make this work, since Artillian ships this out with a 1/4-inch JIC type fitting on the ends of these. All right guys, so here's the fittings that I bought. As you can see here, I've got two adapters. These are 3/8 O-ring type to 3/8 JIC. So that's what they're adapting, from O-ring thread to JIC. So both these ends are 3/8, so you're gonna need two of them. I think these cost me about $2 a piece. And then you're gonna need two elbows. Now these elbows are 3/8 JIC male and a 3/8 JIC female. And what these are gonna do is these are gonna thread onto here, and that's going to allow us to redirect the hose so that the hose can run straight through, instead of having to have you know, a really tight bend on it, so it can bend and go into the block here, because that's just going to end up kinking the hose over time or making the hose brittle by having that sharp of a bend on it. So I just didn't feel comfortable with that. Also, because most of these third functions mount straight out with the couplers, a lot of them don't have a ton of hose to go out towards the loader, so the less hose you got to spend to try to wrap around and connect to this, the better. So that's why I felt this is the best way to go about it. Elbow right off of the block, and then you can just continue your hose straight over, and it really shouldn't need any more length than I already have out now. So these are the ones that Artillian ships with the block. This is a 1/4-inch JIC, so this will not work with most third function hoses. So we're just gonna go ahead and thread in our new fitting here, 3/8 O-ring type to 3/8 JIC. Throw our second one in. Again, these are 11/16. These don't have to be super tight because they are an O-ring type. So basically you just want to get these snug, and they're plenty good for a good seal. So we've got both the adapters in there. Now we go ahead and thread our elbows on there. I'm just going to do them by hand for now, because we want to leave them loose so that we can orientate them the way we need to. And I'm thinking the way we're going to orientate this is going to be something like this. So you can see how they're kind of at a 45-degree angle as well. That way our hoses come straight off, kind of at an angle, coming down off of the loader frame and right into these. And that way these are not interfering with each other, because if we had them both straight out, one of them would be crooked. So I think that's the best route to go with that. So now we should be all set. We can get this thing bolted right onto the loader frame and hook up our final hoses, and I think we'll be all set. All right guys, so I've got you set up next to the loader here. We've got the hydraulic block all put together the way we want it. All we need to do is loosen up these worm clamps. We've got a 5/16 on a little impact gun here. Just zip these apart. And this part is going to be a little bit tricky because we're going to have to go underneath some of this bracketry and stuff for the loader park stand. And you want to make sure when you do this that you get these plastic sleeves directly on the bottom so that the worm clamps are not going to scratch up your loader. So we've got to kind of fish these through and kind of bend them backwards. Got to kind of get them underneath this first little brace here for the park stand. Just like that. And then we're gonna have to wrap it up around the front. Okay, so now I've got you guys underneath the tractor here. What I'm gonna have to do with these two clamps, as you can see right here, I'm gonna have to bring them up above the park stand here. Kind of fish them above it. There's one, and there's two. So now we've got them underneath the park stand, and we can go ahead and kind of move the block around and kind of position it where we need to, so that we can make this final connection here back at the worm clamp and tighten these up. All right, guys, so I've got you back on the top side here. As you can see, these are my sleeves. I'm making sure I've got them on the bottom here. And I am just basically pulling the block back towards me, and I'm bending the worm clamps up against the block here so I can get the block positioned where I want it. So I'm pushing it up against the park stand mechanism. I'm kind of forcing it like that, and you can see how the worm clamp here is getting a nice corner to it and bending around the block. Now I've got the block in a much better position because before the worm clamp was forcing the block way out towards my grill guard. So now I think I got this where I need to. I can go ahead and connect the worm clamps on the back side here. There we go. Once I bent each side of the worm clamp down closer to the block, I was able to get the worm clamp started, no problem at all. Okay, so now I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side, but you guys aren't going to be able to see it, so. All right, there we go. Okay, so now I've got my impact gun ready, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to suck this block back towards this rod here for the loader mechanism. So I've got it forced back like that now, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten these worm clamps up with my impact gun. But before I do, I just want to make sure I've got these plastic protectors on the bottom nice and centered. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and tighten the rest by hand, where I can make sure I don't strip out these clamps, and I think we're gonna be in good shape. Okay guys, so now I've got you set up. Hopefully you guys can see these hydraulic fittings here. You can see how they're perfectly aimed right in between the loader frame here and the grill guard. So I feel really good about the position of the block after we've got it mounted. Both of these elbows are at a 45-degree angle, which is actually coming directly straight out from the loader frame. So the hoses won't be at some kind of awkward angle. I'm really happy about that. So I think I got the positioning right on those elbows. So now we can go ahead and hook up our two hoses. I'm gonna do the bottom one first. You can see I did not have to adjust or cut any of my zip ties to get any more length out of this. So if you guys are doing this, this is definitely the way I would go. I would definitely use the fittings that I used. It should put the fittings off of your new splitter block right about where your old fittings were for your old third function block. I'm using a 3/4 inch wrench to tighten these up. And we'll get the top one hooked up. Our last and final step here is just to snug up the elbows. I know the bottom one is perfect. I'm just going to tighten it up where it's at. And now this top one, you want to make sure that it's not rubbing against the other hose. So just make sure you lift it up just a little bit when you tighten it down. All right, guys, well, there she is in all her glory. Finally all done. Turned out really, really well. Definitely happy that everything worked out as far as a fitment goes. You know, they say this works on a Kubota BX. I've just never seen anybody personally install it. I've never seen really any pictures online of it on a Kubota BX. I've looked, and there's really not a whole lot online. So I just knew I had to do an install video on this to help a bunch of people out for anybody who's looking to do, you know, like an Artillian double grapple or any type of attachment off the front that utilizes 2 cylinders. You know, this is going to be really nice to have, and I do have a second grapple over there in the box, which I'm waiting to open, waiting for things to warm up a little bit. So I will do an unboxing of that, and I have a nice little box on top. That'll definitely be something I will be putting on the channel, hopefully shortly here if the weather ever warms up. But yeah, as you guys can see, I was able to move these hydraulic lines over a little bit, because if you guys remember my last video when I put this grill guard on, which if you guys didn't see that video, I will put a link right here. But in that video, you guys can see how close my hydraulic lines were where I had my old third function mounted. I had it over quite a bit more because I did not have a grill guard to worry about. So the lines were very, very close coming up and down. And now, as you can see, they're going to be totally clear. The block is also going to be clear. As you can see, the mechanism for the park stand sits way farther out than the block does, so no worries there. I feel like it's tucked down on the loader pretty well. It actually sits lower than the loader level indicator bracket, so that's good. So it's definitely not sticking out where it's going to get hurt. Same thing with the fittings. The fittings actually don't even come farther than this bar right here. They just look like they do because of the caps, the dust protectors there. And as far as this rod goes for rotating and dropping the park stand, I already tested that. Here is the lever right here. So you guys can see that turns just fine. It's not binding or nothing against these worm clamps. So I didn't think that was going to be an issue at all anyway, but I did want to show you guys that in case anybody had issues with that or thought that was going to cause an issue. I really don't think it is going to cause an issue. So yeah, really great product overall. Always impressed by Artillian products. Really excited to use this and my second grapple. And for those of you who think this may be a little bit too close, I did check it. Pull these plugs off and I'll show you. I pulled my grapple over here. And if you see here, the smaller one that's going to be going to this, that's not even plugged in yet. And I definitely got clearance once this is in. You can see how much clearance I've got once that's plugged in. So that's not going to be any kind of problem whatsoever. Same thing with this one here. And then obviously on the other side here, we've got nothing to worry about. So that definitely worked out good, rotating these forward. So I would definitely recommend anybody who's going to be installing one of these on a Kubota BX, definitely watch this video or show it to your friends. I think it'll help a lot of people out, especially with the fittings that I come up with here. The adapter with the elbows keeps it nice and tight. And for anybody with a third function, like I said, they all have the same bracket coming out the front with the lines that come straight forward. They never give you a whole lot of line. As you can see, I've got just a small loop right here. So you don't have all kinds of hose you can pull and actually wrap around like the Artillian unit. Plus, then you don't have that nasty bend in there, and you ain't got to worry about the hose ever kinking or anything like that. So I think this is like a nice clean look, and it really came out well. So only thing left to do now is to test it out, and we'll have to wait for some warmer weather for that. As far as the tools I use, you could see I've just got 4 wrenches out here, and I removed the Artillian quick couplers. You guys don't obviously have to do that, but I use a 7/8 to do that. So really it's only 3 wrenches, 5/16 on a ratchet. They did give you a couple zip ties to relocate the hydraulic lines coming from the diverter or third function, but I never even had to cut a single zip tie. So really happy about that. And then obviously these are the 2 fittings I removed that came from the block when Artillian shipped it to me. You know, if you guys got any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be sure to answer them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna get inside, it's getting pretty late. Hope you enjoyed, and hopefully this weather will start turning up pretty soon and we can get back out in the yard and start doing some work again. I know we're supposed to get a little bit of snow tonight, but I don't think it's gonna stay around, and I don't think it's gonna be a whole lot, but still getting snow here. You know, every time the weather warms up and you think things are going to dry out, we get some more rain or some more snow. But hopefully pretty soon we'll get some nice weather and we can get outside and get some yard work done. So hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. And as always, guys, we'll see you in the next one.